Hello from future me and from future Lizardfolk Mini. As you can see, this guy is already painted, and this is what we're going to be working on in today's episode. I just wanted to give a quick little heads up that we do experience some technical difficulties, so please bear with me, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Hello everyone, and welcome to a cozy mini painting session here at Of Metal and Magic. We're tackling this beautiful Lizardfolk mini today, and this is a 3D printed one, a resin 3D printed mini with the model created by Yasashi Kyojin Studio. And I have this written down here for you if you'd like to search them up. They have some really beautiful minis available for free on Thingiverse, as well as pre-supported options on their Patreon. So definitely check them out because look at the amount of detail on this. We're going to have some fun painting this one. I have already primed it in black and then given it a heavy gray dry brush followed by a slightly less heavy white dry brush to bring out those details and to help with some of the layering of our paints, just so we can go nice and thin, and hopefully some of these highlights that we've made right now will show through later on. But speaking of colors, we're going to hop over to future me, who's going to talk about what colors I end up choosing for today's mini painting session. For paints, today we are using Purple Worm and Beholder Purple. I did break out the Pixie Dust Pink and did try and use it, but ultimately to very little effect, so don't worry about that one. And we have a Lawful White, which we do mix in with Beholder Purple to give an even lighter shade for highlighting. We use a little bit of Dungeon Stone, but not very much. Grung Green for the eyes, Owlbear Brown for the staff, and then Ochuk Brown for a few different things. Ruddy Skin, Skeleton Bone, Fair Skin, and then our only two washes are a black wash and a flesh wash. As for today's brushes, we're just going to be using these three. We have a single zero brush, as well as a number 2 brush. And then I've got this brush that I like to use as a dry brush. It's a nice cheap brush, takes a lot of abuse. Just make sure you clean it afterwards and it's good to go. It's nice to have a dedicated dry brush just because of the process of dry brushing can really tear the bristles apart. As you can see, this one is curling pretty wildly. I've already loaded up some purple, but real quick, I'm going to talk about the colors, or the colors I have planned for this one. The nice thing about Lizardfolk and a few other creatures is you can really go with whatever your heart desires for colors. For me, I am actually going to be painting this one with a sort of purple primary color. Normally, when you think of Lizardfolk, you think of greens and that kind of tonation, greens going into yellows. And I do have those in my homebrew world, but I also have a bunch of other different Lizardfolk going from reds into purples. These ones are specifically a water-dwelling one, a water-dwelling Lizardfolk, and their coloration is purple or black and purple for their scales, as well as a gray and sort of lilac or light purple for their underbelly. So we're going to try and achieve that today. First up, we're going to be tackling the main bulk of the mini with dry brushing. It's a very messy process, so I like to get that out of the way first, and that way afterwards I can come in with the finer details like the rope, the staff handle, and this really cool detail, which is that looks like a bird skull for the point of the spear. As well as the underbelly is going to take a little bit more finessing. I want to be careful when I'm dry brushing or going around the underbelly, because since we've got a gray and lilac underbelly for what I want to achieve, I want to maintain some of this gray that I've already worked so hard to achieve. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get painting. So, for those of you not familiar with dry brushing, it's fairly straightforward. You just load on a bunch of paint onto your dry brush. Make sure it's nice and ingrained in those bristles, and then wipe most of it off. All right. We don't want to go too heavy with getting it off. Normally, with dry brushing, you want very little on there, but we do want a decent amount of purple to show through. All right, let's see how that feels. All right, that's working. And I know that I'm probably gonna have to go over this with a black wash or a shadow wash or an Nuln Oil, depending on what mini paint company you are using. That's going into pink, but that's okay. We will darken that up later, and we can always go a little bit heavier with our dry brush. I know that I'm going to be hitting this with purple, a dark purple. I'm using Purple Worm for my paint. So it's okay if I do this in multiple layers and then come back later with a much lighter purple for those highlights and then darken everything so it it A, blends together, and B, gives a darker purple look. Alright, try and be a little bit careful around this rope, but otherwise I'm okay if it gets on there. And then the back of the hand right here. And then this muscle I kind of count as the underbelly. So I'm gonna try not to get onto there too much, but it's okay if I do, because you've got an element of fading between those two colors, so it's all right if some of it leaks over. All right, I'm about empty on my paint, so let's go ahead and grab a little bit more. And then get it all out of the brush. All out, or most of it out. Let's go ahead and focus on those areas that I haven't gotten to yet before trying to bring a little bit more purple back in. And then if I'm not happy with the intensity of the purple, the other option, I keep hitting my camera stand. The other option is to just go ahead and cover it all with purple, because we will then just do a black wash over it and that'll sink into the recesses all the same, which it looks like we might have to do. This is a very pink one, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I've already told my players what these Lizardfolk look like, so I kind of have to stick with that color palette. Okay, so yes, this is coming out more pink. Let's see if I can layer it up by taking not as much off my brush this time. Going straight on with that purple. Yeah, that's staying pink. That's okay. We tried it. This would have been the easy way to do it, but there's nothing wrong with going back over it and slapping a little bit more paint on. So let's get a bit more purple out. We can leave our brush here. We're going to need that dry brush a little later on and top up on our purple paint. Because there are so many details here, we are definitely going to want to make sure we water this paint down. There we go. To about the consistency of milk. So a slightly thicker water. All right, let's see how that looks now. Oh, that might be why. It might be because it's a fairly light paint. Let me see here. I have two purples. I have Purple Worm and Beholder Purple, and I thought Purple Worm would be the darker of the two. But it looks like one might dry a little lighter than the other. I'm still happy with this though, because I know that the black wash is going to darken that down. All right, let's go all the way over their face, their schnoz, and they do have some teeth. I'll try and avoid them a little bit, but otherwise I'm not too upset if I cover some of the teeth. That's going to be okay. We'll pick that up. Oh, and there's going to be a little bit of that underbelly fur under their jaw, or under their neck, right there, which I think I went a little bit over the line there. That's okay. Wet my brush, clean it off, and mop it up. Nice and easy to do. And that way we still actually get a little bit of that gray and a little bit of lilac, which is what I was originally hoping for. I'm not going to be too upset if my coverage isn't great. As long as I'm getting the high points, then I am happy. Because if I miss some of the shadow, that actually plays into what I want. I want the recesses to be dark. If you are painting along with me today, I'd love to know what you are painting. Are you also painting a Lizardfolk? Like you were looking for videos and inspiration on what to paint and how to paint it? And you were looking up Lizardfolk and you found me? I'd love to know what colors you're going for. Or if you're going for something different, you're just here to chill and vibe with the rest of us, that's okay too. I'd love to know what you're painting. What you're painting, how it looks, and then when you're done with it, I'd love to see what it looks like. I don't think you can share images on YouTube, but you can on socials, and I do have links to my socials in the description, so feel free to go ahead and tag me in a photo of what you painted. Alright, I think I'm getting a little too thick on my paint, so a bit more water, please. There we go. Alright. Alright. And that's a little thin, but that's okay. That still works for what we want it to do. And then there are these bone spikes on the back, which I was going to try and avoid, but you know what? That's okay. Let's just be a little bit messy. Let's just go ahead and cover them up because we can go back over those later. We will probably handle the shadow wash or the black wash first before we circle back around to those bony spikes that go all the way down the back. Probably. We'll see. We're going to play it by ear. Play it by ear, see what feels right, see if it acts right. I know when I started mini painting, one of the things that would hold me back is making mistakes. I'd be so afraid of ruining a perfectly beautiful mini with my mistakes. I didn't want to ruin it. But you know what? It's only paint. It's really easy to take the paint off, and it's also really easy to just paint over it because we're going in such thin layers that those details don't get covered up. They don't get smushed up. Alright. How we doing? We're good. Got some over here. Oh, I am running out of paint already. I guess I needed to give myself a little bit more. I didn't prep a wet palette today just because I thought a lot of this would be dry brushing, and you don't need a wet palette for dry brushing. But look at that. Turns out we're doing a lot of not dry brushing, which is cool. Alright, I'm going to top up on my purple worm paint. There we go. Rush trying to run away. It's a little thick for me because I didn't thin it down. There we go. Another nice thing about painting a Lizardfolk is there's so much to go on for reference photos. Like if you're not sure how certain colors will look together, like if you wanted to do a purple Lizardfolk like I'm doing, but you weren't really sure what color the underbelly should be, you just look up purple lizards and they're out there. Purple lizards are a thing, and there's so many different colors out there for lizards, so many different patterns, designs, that nature's done the hard work for you on finding what colors work and what colors don't work. So you don't even need to worry about color theory and all that. That's what I did when I decided what I wanted the underbelly to look like. I wanted to know what's out there. So I searched up purple lizards, and hey, it looks like there are a few different options. You can kind of go blue, you can kind of go into a darker purple, or, as what I found, a grayish, lilacish color. Alright, I'll do the tops of the fingers too. There's scales on the tops there, and there, and there. Now at the underside, that's where the soft part is. So that's where we're going to go in with our lilac and gray. We got our hand over here that we need to tackle. Don't need to worry too much about getting it onto the rope or the stem, because we can just clean up those lines later. Alright, so that kind of starts going into the fleshy bit on the underside. I do need to remember to keep an eye on my camera, make sure I'm not getting too involved in painting and just forgetting to keep this in frame. Alright, that's the first base coat done. Okay. Just give it a twirl and a whirl. What would be nice is if I had a purple wash. That would have made this a lot easier, because then I could just do a purple wash or lilac, or thin it down into a really thin purple wash for the gray areas, but I don't have that. And you can kind of make your own. You can get Flow Aid and thin regular mini paints down that way. And I do actually have Flow Aid, but we're going to keep things nice and simple. I want to try and keep this series, you know, beginner friendly. So if you've just got the paints, the regular old paints, you don't have anything too fancy, you can still follow along. Not to say here and there I won't bust out something a little bit more unique, like colored washes, because you can buy different colored washes. But that'll just be here and there. That's when it really needs it. It'll really help. Maybe that'll be centerpiece minis. Who knows? Right now this channel's still young, so I don't know what direction we'll take. We'll see. We'll see what kind of feedback we get. What you guys like, what you guys don't like. Alright. I think we're good there. Trying to decide how I feel about the legs. If that should be purple too, or if that should be soft underbelly. think I'm gonna go a little bit more over on the purple. There we go. So it's not necessarily purple scales, but that purple is kind of blending into the rest of the body. Here we go. And we need to make sure that those feet are covered. I almost forgot about those. Okay, I think we're happy there. I'm happy. I hope you guys are happy with your minis so far. A little bit more purple on this foot. And I have a little bit more purple left. There we go. We're gonna go ahead. There we go. And after this bit, let the paint dry a smidge before diving into... Ooh, this is a little bit tricky to get. Let the paint dry and then dive into doing the wash. I don't want the wash to undo what we've just done. It's not that kind of wash. Okay, good. I think I'm happy there. Perfect. Wash our paintbrush off. And then while that's drying, let's go ahead and load up our black wash. You know, I think something that I might do while that's drying is bring out one of my browns for the staff so I can paint the wood, and then I can use the black wash on there too. Do it all at once, that way it all kind of blends together. So we'll go ahead and paint this. We're not going to be using a black wash for the rope, just because that's a much lighter color. So we'll probably end up using something more like a gray wash. If you have it, something that I've found that works really good for wood, and assuming you're doing the same thing that I do, where you take a mini and you kind of darken it either with a black wash or black primer, and then come back and highlight it using grays and whites. If you're doing that, then something that works really good for browns in general and woods is coming in with an ink instead of a paint, because an ink just tints everything. So you'll maintain those highlights that you just did. But not everybody has that. Ooh, sorry for bumping the camera. There we go. I can go a little bit further in. There. Boop. The interesting thing will be trying to differentiate the color between the rope and the color between this bird skull here. I think something that I do want to do as well, I'm not sure if I want to do it now or after. Probably after. Is I want to find a way to blend the colors. So I don't want it to go straight from whatever color we finish here with to the color here. I'd like a transition. And there are different ways to achieve that, and trying to decide. Right now, I think what I'm going to do is go ahead with that black wash And then when I dry brush, try and use the dry brush to transition between the two. All right, I'd say our paint is dry enough for our wash. I'm gonna thin it down just a smidge. Normally you don't have to, but I find that it goes on a little bit better if you just add a smidge of water. There we go. You don't have to be too neat with this. You don't want to go on too heavy. You don't have to be too neat. You're allowed to go over just like we did before, just because we're going to be touching up those other areas later. And you can see how it brings all those scales back, those details back. Mop up some of my excess over here, bring it over here. Okay, a little bit heavy there. That's all right. I'm already starting to run out of my black wash. Here I thought I gave myself enough, but I think there should be enough left for the handle of the spear. As long as I didn't miss anywhere on the Lizardfolk. It does look a little bit messy right now, but that's okay. That'll all get cleaned up as it dries, and once we put on a dry brush on top of that, it'll bring that shine down, help highlight some of these points on the scales. Okay, on to the staff real quick. Don't need a whole lot. Just a few quick swipes. Perfect. There we go. Now we just have to wait for that to dry. So we can tackle a few different things next. While we're waiting for that wash to dry, we can go ahead and try and work on some of the paint, although we do have to be very careful of wet wash. We can definitely safely tackle the skull, because there's no wash near that. And I would definitely wait to tackle the bone spikes. Or, if you want, you can also take a quick break. Stretch your arms, stretch your back, your shoulders, stretch your legs. I find that it's good to do every 20 minutes, half an hour, if you can. Sometimes you just get into the zone, though, and you lose track of time. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break, grab a tea, coffee, something like that, and let this dry. And I'll be back with you in, well, just a minute. Welcome back, everybody. If you took a break along with me, it looks like our wash is all dry, which is perfect. It is a little bit splotchy. I don't know if you can tell on camera, and that is a-okay. What we're going to do is we're going to dry brush with the original color that we had very lightly. That should even things out, and then we'll have an even lighter purple that will go on even softer than our other color. I actually loaded up my lighter color but forgot to load up my purple. So we're going to load that up right now. Perfect. And load up our dry brush. Don't need a huge amount. Get that off. Or get as much off as we can. Leaving some on there. And start dry brushing. There we go. Oh. It's moving on the base a little bit. I use E6000. It's a flexible glue to attach it to the base, which means there is a little bit of give, but that usually helps if somebody drops it or knocks it. That means that any weak points aren't necessarily going to snap. Hopefully some of that flex helps absorb the hits and keeps it from breaking. Which I feel is especially popular when you've got resin printed minis or 3D printed minis. If you're using FDM, it can be a little bit fragile sometimes depending on the materials that you're using. Alright, let's focus on the more splotchy areas just to try and even things out. Highlight the face a smidge over there. There we go. You can actually tell I didn't do a great job at taking this off of its supports. That's because I switched to a new slicer and I'm still refining the settings that I have. So there's a little bit of clumping there that I didn't quite notice, that I'm not used to having to clean up, but that's okay. Honestly, that kind of blends in with the scales really well, so I'm not too worried about it. Alright, let's hit these bits. I think I might need a top up on my purple. Just a little bit more. Little bit more. There aren't too many more spots to hit up. There. There. I am trying not to get onto the brown, but I don't mind getting onto those ropey bits. That's quite alright. Get into here. And then I believe I said earlier that I don't mind, I actually do want to kind of fade into that gray just a little bit, just to try and blend in between those areas. Blend in from our purple and black to our gray and lilac. But we'll do more of that once we have our lighter color, our lighter purple, which is kind of a lilac. Kind of. Okay. Perfect. And now we can go ahead, and while we've already got some of our purple on our dry brush, we'll go over to our lighter purple, which I've already loaded up in my little cup here. Work that in. We don't need to clean off our brush because honestly, that little mixture of paints helps. And we'll see how this looks. These are a little similar in color that I'm not sure it'll pop. It does, just a little bit. So if we want a more dramatic highlight, we might bring in a pink, let's say, and see how that looks. Do that on a discrete area just in case we don't like the look of it, and we probably don't have to go all the way back to scratch. There we go. A little bit more of that. And then fade in to those gray areas. Because usually when you see lizards, it's not a hard line between the soft underbelly and the scales, or sometimes they have scales on their bellies, and those will be a different color, and usually there's a smooth, gradual transition. It's not abrupt or anything like that. Okay. A little bit more on the face here that always needs highlights. And I think I'm pretty happy with that, although I do think I will bring out a little bit of that pink. Just to very lightly hit the tops. Not gonna go everywhere, just gonna kind of use it as a light source, an indication of light source coming top down. Oh, I only want to go, ooh, this needs a lot more mixing. I apparently do not use my pink very often. Always mix your paints very thoroughly. There we go, that's much better. Okay, let's see. Let's try down by the tail for our discrete testing area. I think that works. I think that works. So a little bit on the shoulders there. And if you're trying to decide on a highlight color, something that's good to remember is that typically, and this isn't a all-encompassing rule, but typically you'll notice that highlights are warmer and shadows are colder, at least fairly frequently. Not always the case, it's not a hard and fast rule, but It's a good one if you can't quite decide which direction you wanted to go. All right. Look at that. And honestly, this guy is coming along really nicely. I don't think we're going to have enough time for the base, just because I like to keep these episodes nice and short. But the base is going to be super easy. You're just going to use probably more of that dry brush technique. This is a base that I found online. I'll actually have to dig up the link to that and put that either as a pinned comment or in the description, because I can't quite remember off the top of my head where I got it. These minis from Yasashi Studio do not have a base. So that's something to bear in mind if you're printing these. A little bit more here and there. I feel like I can be a little bit more aggressive with that. Especially around the face. Especially right there, because there's a lot of detail that we want to bring up to the front. There we go. Okay. I'm fairly happy with that. It kind of has a iridescent effect to it. At least in person it does. This is kind of one of the color schemes that I don't know how well it comes across on camera. Alright, and something that I think I might do as well is thin down some black wash just on the underside, because it looks like there are some areas that could do with more of a suggestion of being in shadow or being darker. But I'll probably save that for a little bit later on. Right now, we can go ahead and dry brush the staff or the handle for the spear. You know what? I'm going to hold off on that, because the dry brushing for that will blend into the dry brushing for the rope as well as the bird's skull. So what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and pull out some additional colors. I am going to start with Ruddy Skin for the skull and Flump Pink for the rope. Flump Pink is more of a flesh color, incidentally, if you're trying to figure that one out. So both of these are kind of flesh colors. I wanted similar but different so that the skull stands out, and then we're going to bring that up to more of a bone color. As always, mix your paints. I have tried to figure out which paints I'm going to use early on, like before I start the episode, but I always forget something, or sometimes I change my mind. Sometimes I feel like I need an additional color, like I knew I needed pink to bring in for those highlights, so that's why I saved the breakdown for the paint until the very end. Let's go ahead and use our thinner brush, our 0. Wet that up and prep it for paint, and bring some paint into our Ruddy Skin. This is our more tanned skin. It's skin tone with a little bit more brown to it, I'd say. And go in nice and thin on this skull. You don't need to worry too much about getting into the nooks and crannies, because we used a black primer, so that's done a lot of the shading for us. The thing with a lot of painting, not just mini painting, but painting in general, is giving the impressions of lighting and shadow, or of light sources, etc. You're giving the impression that it's there, not that it actually is there. Just tricking the brain into thinking, hey, there should be something here. Alright, we can be a little bit messy. There we go. And there. And in there. And I may actually have to stop soon to take another break because my camera has just let me know that it is low on power. That's all right. We'll do what we can for now. So that's looking a little bit dark, but that's all right. So instead of adding a wash to this, what I'm actually going to do is just build up the layers, build up the colors from dark to high. So we're starting with our dark, and then we'll come in with probably a skeleton bone and then a fair skin to highlight these. And then we can use a wash if we need to blend those colors together. All right, since that's the color of bone, I've decided we are gonna go ahead and start painting some of these other areas. Some of these other bony spikes. These ones we can go a little bit thicker with our paints. We don't have to worry about the sections of paint that I watered down because it's just a singular spike. We'll completely cover this spike and then build up the highlights. So the lower parts are going to stay this darker ruddy skin color. And as we work up, we'll add thinner, narrower lines building up to highlights to indicate light source and indicate that these are bony spikes. And you could absolutely make your bony spikes whatever you want, really. They don't have to look like bone. They could be any color you want. They could be black. You have a few animals that do have black talon-like spikes coming out of them. How close do we get to the tail? It feels like we get pretty close, honestly. Like right there. Okay. And then we have a little bit here. And a teeny tiny bit right there. As they start to converge into a single stream from two. Make our way up to the head. Oh, I gotta steady my finger just a little bit. And my cat wants to say hello. Hi, cat. Hey. And then we can do the same thing with the talons. And then the teeth, I'm not actually sure. I think with the teeth, we'll go with a much lighter color. Hey, you can't, hi. There you go. There you go. The bony parts are going to be a lot dirtier because they're exposed to the elements, whereas the teeth are probably going to see a lot more action, as are the nails, but you know what, the nails are also exposed, so they're going to get more grunge and grime. So I don't mind going ahead and making them the same color as the bony spikes. Makes sense to me. So you just go with what makes sense to you. It's your story to tell. And each mini has a different story that they can tell. Oh, I forgot to get rid of this. There we go. Hopefully that hasn't been causing any color clashing issues. Here we go. Okay, can we see? Yes, we can see a little bit on the hand that's grasping the spear. Just a teeny tiny bit. Let's see here. That one's going to be hard. Just a couple of little dots. Oh, I maybe had a little bit too much water there. Pull some of that back. Go with a less diluted version of my paint. Alright, so it feels like there, there, and there. Those are the nails. Ish. Close enough. Alright, after that, do we need a second coat for the skull? We do. We went on a thin, so some of that undercoat is showing through, but we don't necessarily want it to. We can just go for the highlights when we're doing our second coat, usually because it's the darker portions that show through. Perfect. All right. And then the underside, I'm happy leaving that as it is with the shadow kind of peeking through that first thin coat of paint that we did. All right. I'm happy with that. I haven't decided on the eye color yet. That's one thing, because these are such narrow slits that I feel like we're going to be able to do just a single pinprick of a color. And I want it to be a good color. Right now I'm thinking a green or a yellow. We'll see where the mood takes us in a minute. For now, looks like I have to recharge my camera, and I'll be right back. Welcome back if you took another break just like me, although mine was to recharge the camera rather than my arms or my shoulders. I did take an opportunity to go over the mini while my camera was charging just to see if there's anywhere that I missed or, figure out a game plan. And I did realize that I didn't do a great job at blending in the lilac or beholder purple into the gray over here. So I know that's somewhere that I want to tackle. I think we're going to hit that up first before we resume with painting the staff and the bones and spikes and things like that. Should be a very quick and simple touch-up. I have my colors loaded up off to the side already, although this dry brush might need a little bit of cleaning. It's this one, this side of the leg. Just gonna fade that in, bring a little bit more purple from the other sides. There we go, because it was a little bit too harsh of a line. And a little bit on the back of that heel there while we're at it. Okay, perfect. Next, we are going to go ahead and work on the rope. Now, earlier, I definitely said I was going to use Flumph Pink, but on second thought, I think that color is going to be a little bit too close to the ruddy skin. So I've opted for an Otyugh Brown. It's kind of a very yellow, yellowy light brown. And I've already put some off to the side. We're going to use our single zero brush. Get that wet again. Put a little bit into our paint just to thin it down, because we do have details in there that we want to make sure we don't obscure. And if we go nice and thin, we may just need the one coat. Although, I'm not optimistic about that. I think we'll probably need more than one. Ooh, you're a little too watery. How's that feel? It's a little better. Here we go. We don't need to worry too much about getting into the recesses there, because we'll use the natural shadows from our primer. It is definitely a little bit too watery, so we'll go ahead and mix in a bit more of the undiluted paint. get off the excess from our brush and see how that does over here. That's better. Not too thick, not too thin. Go back over these areas because they definitely got a little bit too thin on those. Now the underside's going to be very tricky to paint. We'll figure that out soon. There we go. And we may end up using a wash just to separate these colors a little bit, to separate the rope from the bird skull, even though we're going to be heading up from this as a dark color and up to a lighter color. There we go. Go for some awkward angles right here. This is actually where having an old brush that is curled at the tip actually comes in handy, because it gets into some of those slightly harder to reach spots when you're just using a clean, straight-tipped brush. I believe they have brushes out there that you can buy where I believe it's the ferrule, is bent at about a 45-degree angle, and that would probably also help a lot with painting those hard to reach spots. Getting a little bit of a dry brush effect, which is nice. Some of these areas, that'll kind of help a little bit later on when we come back into highlight the rope and give it a little bit more texture and character. We're honestly not too far from finishing if my estimates are correct, because the highlighting process is going to be nice and quick. I did just realize that earlier I said we'll probably be dry brushing the wood with the rope all at once, and we will, but I don't think that that's going to highlight the rope. I just wanted to clarify that because I know I said that earlier. You're probably wondering, well, if we're dry brushing all of it together, surely the rope won't need all of this extra work that we're planning on putting in. Okay, let's see. Trying to make out where the rope is on the back side over here. Quite hard to tell. I believe it's this portion. Just didn't want to paint a thumb by mistake. There we go. We'll take a quick look around. That's pretty much all of the rope taken care of. Wonderful. And now we can move on to the teeth. And you know, I might use this Ochug brown because we still have some in my little cup here to start on the teeth as their shadows. These are super tiny, which means we're gonna have to really hunker in, stabilize our elbows, stabilize our hands, and get real close to figure out where some of those teeth are. Then again, you can always just paint some teeth in. They don't have to be, you know, three-dimensional, protruding. They don't have to be details. You can always just imply that they're there. All right, there we go. And while we're at it, we can probably use the Ochug Brown very thin down. So some of that initial mix that I made, if it's still wet, yes it is, on the nails. Just to give that little bit of highlight. We can mostly cover this because we just want some of that ruddy skin peeking through. Gotta change how I'm looking at this just to see where those toenails are. Okay, let's see if we have enough of this mixture for some of the other nails. Sorry for hitting the camera. I do have to get pretty close in order to actually make sure that I'm painting these correctly. There we go. And just a little dot, dot, and dot. Perfect. Now then, for the rest of the bone spikes, I think we'll do the same. Just a very thin, I'll probably need a little bit more than I've got here right now. All right, let's see how that does. That could actually probably be a little bit thinner if I'm honest. That's doing some very good coverage. Better coverage than I thought it would. Now we're starting to get thinner as I'm running out of paint from the brush. There, there. And then just little taps. Here and here. All right. That was way too thick. Way too thick. Let's try and thin that out and pull it off. There we go. We have to come back to that in a second. There we go. Okay. And a little bit more on that top spike, I think. Just a bit. Oh, little cat hair made its way onto the brush. Here we go. All right. Give it a good spin, make sure there's nothing else to tackle in regards to that specific color. And I think we're good. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're gonna dry brush the staff or the spear. I keep calling it staff, but the spear. The spear's wood. And then while we're at it, we're going to dry brush this because we are just going to use that Archie brown. I have another dry brush here just because this one does need a wash. It's the paint's really dried up in there, and it's kind of seizing the bristles. That is definitely going to happen. So it's always good to have a backup brush. Okay, let's see. Is this... Oh, did I pull too much off? No, we're good. There we go. And you're always going to go against the grain when you're doing this, if there is a grain to be seen. If you go with the grain, then you'll kind of just fill in those shadows. If you go against the grain, that's when the bristles kind of skip over those little divots and recesses, and that's how you build up your layers of highlights. Alright, I'm going to put my thumb underneath the beak there just to give it a little bit of extra support. Make sure I don't accidentally snap this. That would be unfortunate after all the work we've put in. Put my finger on the other side and do the same thing. And we are getting some of those highlights. Yeah, perfect. Not as noticeable with this side, a little bit more with this side. I think we could probably be a little heavier with that. Yeah, perfect. Okay, get some in there. And I'm trying to be careful not to get it on the hand because it's such a light color that it'll be really easy to accidentally spill onto some of that purple and show up. Easy to fix if it does though. Just get some more purple and paint in the lines. Okay, there we go. And try and get that bottom lip. There we go. So as I said before, I was going to use a slow build-up process, which I may still come in with some Achiok brown on that skull just to lighten it up a little bit. I don't want to erase too much of that ruddy skin. I want to keep that separation there. So I think we're actually pretty happy with that. Yes, I'm going to say we're happy with that, which means we can bring in our next colors, which they are going to be skeleton bone and possibly fair skin, but we're going to start with skeleton bone. And as you may have guessed, this is going to be for the bony parts. So we'll go in with our small brush again. Pick up a little bit of that. And you could do with a little dilution, especially for that bird skull. We're just gonna gently tap the highlights. We can see all of the high points now thanks to that dry brushing that we did. So we just go in and gently, oh, I feel like my paint's drying before I can actually do anything with it. There we go. Gently skirt over those hard edges. And bring that color in there. This side didn't have many hard edges, so we're probably going to have to fade that in, especially towards the tip. Seems like I need to get a little bit more in my diluted paint section here. There we go. There we go. I figured that the end is going to be a lot lighter than the rest of it, just because that's the point that sees most of the use. Pull some of that back again. There we go. All right, I'm really happy with how that's looking. Now we can go in again with thin layers. Doesn't need to be quite as thin because we don't need to blend as much with the bony spikes. That's a little too thin. That's a little bit too much water. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. I would have liked that to be a little bit thinner personally. A little bit more thinned down. So let's go ahead and just wrap this up. Maybe we could possibly go back and wash that down with some water, but you know what? I think that's okay. As long as it's good at an arm's distance, as long as you can tell from a distance what the implication is, then you are good. Your players are not going to be right up in this character's business. They are going to be playing at a table where each mini is probably going to be about an arm's reach away. It's a really important thing to remember if you're trying to get minis on the table. If you're like me, you love spending time on the details, getting everything blended as best as you can. But when you're on a time crunch, like you've got minis to paint for a game, then you have to prioritize. Okay, I think we need a little bit more on this spike right there. There we go. I think I will highlight the teeth. This will be very hard to do. Just go in with a teeny tiny little bit of paint and just kind of like lightly tap each one. But that being said, what I'll probably also do is come in with a wash. I'll probably come in with a brown wash after the fact just to dull those down, because those pearly whites definitely stand out probably a bit too much. No. Now that I hold it at arm's reach, I'm happy with that. When it's up close, I feel like it's a little too obvious, but at arm's reach, I think that's perfect. So I take that back. I won't be washing those down. Okay, let's go ahead, grab a little bit more, maybe a bit thicker for the nails. Get those nails to pop, stand out. Black nails probably make more sense on a purple and black Lizardfolk than, you know, bony looking nails. But at the same time, I want my players to know that these characters have claws. If you happen to, you know, pull a weapon away, then, well, what else are they going to use but their claws and their teeth? So it's good for the players to actually see a representation of those. At a distance, you're not going to see the black ones, but if you paint them in bone, you can see those. Then again, these particular Lizardfolk, the purple water-dwelling ones, these are allies right now, for now. We'll see how the game progresses, but I expect they'll remain allies for the rest of the campaign. Or at least the rest of this plot arc. Can't say too much, though. Just a little highlight on the toenails, and that's the job done. Okay. We are so close. We just have the rope to highlight and then the eyes, and then we're all done. Okay, let's go ahead and bring in our fair skin, and that's what we're going to use for the rope. If this doesn't highlight it enough, then we'll bring in the wash, let the wash soak into those recesses. And then re-highlight it. But otherwise, we are very close. Very close. It's very exciting. As for eye color, I haven't decided yet still. I really haven't. Which is odd. Usually I have that in mind a lot sooner. I could just leave it as those slits. That's what I did with a lot of my earlier minis. I didn't really worry about the eyes because they were so tiny. I need thicker paint because I don't want this. I don't want these to slip into the recesses. I want them to hover on top. So we are just going to gently follow those rope lines, those strand lines. I do think we are going to need to use a wash. That's okay. Yeah, we're going to need to use a wash. Oop, went a little too thick there. Just because there's not enough contrast between this highlight and the paint below it. So let's go ahead and just do what we can for now. And then we'll come in with that wash after the fact. I do have to bring my face very close to the camera, so I'm sorry if I nudge things a little bit, or if the mini goes out of frame. I am trying to keep an eye on that as best as I can. As for which color wash, we'll probably just use something simple like a flesh wash. We don't want this rope getting too dark. I don't think it needs that. I think flesh wash will be fine. And then we'll see if we need to bring that back up. And if we do need to bring it back up, we'll see if we can't use something like a very small brush for dry brushing. Just because that'll be the quickest option, and I won't be too worried if that spills over onto either the wood or onto the skull, because the colors are similar enough, and if we're going light enough with our pressure, then it shouldn't matter. Shouldn't be too noticeable. Okay, there we go. Not to mention that wash will help separate the rope and the skull even further. All right, so let me go ahead and get my flesh wash. So I've just found out that my main microphone wasn't actually recording during that last section, or I actually don't know how long, whether that was a short segment or whether it was the whole of the last segment. I just checked it real quick and sadly it was off. So hopefully the main camera microphone gives okay audio. I'm sorry if it does not. However, we're going to soldier on and keep painting. I've already got some flesh wash ready for me, and we are going to just go over this rope section very gently. I don't want to accidentally cover the other areas, such as the purple scales. I am debating whether I want to do another more drastic highlight or not, but I think I'm gonna have to do the arm's reach test again, just to see how I feel about that. A little bit more here. And this is actually pretty easy because the grooves of the rope are drawing in the wash using capillary action, which means I don't have to worry about too much excess going all over the place. A little bit more on the brush. There we go. That's much better. That is looking a lot better. And after this, I know I mentioned I wanted to tackle some shadow on the undermost parts by using a black wash in specific areas. So that will be the next step after this. And that will give the wash time to dry before we come back over it with any sort of, you know, dry brushing, or whether we're going to do a manual highlight. Here's a little nook down here, which I don't think I really got into with any of the other colors, so we're going to rely on the wash to fill that in with color. There we go. No one will be the wiser. And this is definitely going to be one of the grody kinds of ropes. Seen a lot of action, seen a lot of wear and tear. I think I'll go a little bit heavier right here just to allow a little bit of distinguishment from the rope and the beak of the skull. And then the same over here. Just want to provide a little bit of shadow. There we go. Now those two look much more separate from each other. Can't forget the underside. In fact, the underside's probably the more important part, where that's where we want it to be darker. Perfect. There we go. There we go. That looks a lot better. I am much happier with that. In all honesty, it may not even need some re-highlighting, thanks to the fact that we already did some of that highlighting before adding the wash. Okay. Let's take another twirl. Make sure I didn't miss anywhere. I think we did want some right here. Perfect. There we go. Adding a little bit more on the underside of the ropes just to give the effect of it casting shadow. And then maybe a little bit on the underside of the staff itself, just so it's a little bit darker than the top portion. And you know what? I'll do the same thing with the spearhead. There we go. Just a little bit of extra detail. Not that we'll have many players looking at the underside, but we know it's there. We can be happy in that. Okay, I think I will try watering down this just a smidge. I'm gonna delicately try it on some of the teeth. Yeah, I am happier with that. Immediately happier with that. The teeth were just a little bit too bright, and you can still see them at a distance. Sorry, my instinct is to naturally put it at arm's reach. So to keep it in frame, I have to move myself away from the camera. Okay. I'm happy with that. Let's go ahead, get our shadow wash, or our black wash, whatever you're using. Shouldn't need too much. And then we're just gonna go for the more recessed parts. Looks like I will need to water that down a little bit more. There we go, okay. Some water into our wash itself. Put there. And you can definitely use this technique to accentuate some of the muscles if you want. We're just going for the darkest parts of this creature, where the most shadow will be. Now the tail definitely has plates on the underside, and those should kind of match with the gray. I know I didn't get a lot of purple on there, but it looks like I got enough on there where it does look purple. So I'm not entirely sure if I want to go back over that or not with a gray or something of the sort. For now, let's just go ahead and add this black wash and see how we feel after the fact. If we need to come in with a gray, then that'll be really easy to dry brush in. The pads of the feet are gray still, just like the soft underbelly. That was nice and easy. The hands, the palms, we haven't even been able to reach, so those have stayed nice and gray. Can definitely do with a little bit more here. There we go. Okay, and it looks like I need to go for the parts of my wash that have not been diluted as much for right there. Sorry for knocking the camera. And this is kind of just a easy cheater way. I guess it's a cheater way of getting your shadows in. And it also allows you to redefine some of these areas that perhaps got a little bit too much paint in them. Accentuate some of those lines, those details, those shadows. This time, instead of going all over, we're just almost like pinstriping, if that's the right term. Just going into small areas. I think that was a little bit heavy on the torso there. Oop. And just pull that back just a smidge. There we go. Much better. And same there. Pull that back just a smidge. And we're going to give it a little bit of shadow under the neck right there. Much better. Okay. While that's drying, we are going to take a look at those eyes. I think I have decided on green, and we're going to try this grung green. This is a nice, vibrant green, and we just want these tiny, tiny little pricks of green in there. So, bear with me while I concentrate as best I can. wish me luck on this part. Here, let's get a little bit more on the brush than we need, and then deposit the excess here on our handle. And get in nice and tight with the elbows. Ooh, that one was not so good. That's okay. That's okay. There we go. So we've gone a little bit over, and that's all right. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to our Beholder Purple. Get some of that out. Let the green dry a little bit. And then using the purple, we will creep up on the green by almost like highlighting the cheekbones. Like so. Okay, that's a lot better. While we're here, just highlight a few other areas that felt like they needed something a little bit extra. There we go. And then I still have a little bit of my black wash, so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually going to try and just delicately get a little bit of black wash on the edges of that green, and that'll give me almost like the effect of a darker green on the outskirts of the eye, going to a lighter green towards the middle of the eye, if I can be delicate enough with this wash. Because the wash will definitely want to pull off the brush into that little alcove for the eye. That's a bit much. There we go. As you can see, my hands are shaky, but you can do it. You just have to hunker your wrists against the table, hunker your body, or hunker your forearms against the table, hunker your elbows into your body, press forward, and that kind of helps stabilize things. And then use as many points of contact with your hand. I've got my palm down here, got my pinky on the back, and then I've got my ring finger right here. As I just kind of press in as best as I can. And that helps with some of the details when you've got shaky hands like I do. Okay. There we go. I think I'm happy with those eyes now. Yeah, that's much better. All right. So now that the wash has had a chance to dry on the rope, I do think I want to go over it very gently with a dry brush of Fair Skin. Don't need a huge amount, just a little bit. And we're just really aiming for the tops. Oh, I've got a little bit of cat hair on there. Sorry for knocking into the camera. And just a little bit was all we needed right there. just to A, matte that down, and B, bring back some of those highlights. There we go. I've got to say, this spear is definitely my favorite part of this magnificent mini. Apologies for the cut again. It looks like both the microphone stopped working at a unknown point in time, and the camera ran out of storage space. So hopefully both of those issues are resolved now, and we can quickly finish up with this mini. We are going to try and tackle a little bit of gray on the bottom there, and we're just going to use this kind of, I wouldn't call it a dark gray, but it's not exactly a light gray either. Something in between, something a little bit in the middle. And then after that point, I think we are pretty much done. I might try and get a little bit more contrast on the highlights of these scales. I don't think the pink was quite doing it. We might have to try something a little bit different. If I have any gray left. There we go. Just need a little bit for our dry brushing. This may not even show up under here, but you know what? I thought it was worth a try. There we go. Yeah, it's showing up. I think I have a little bit too much on there, but that's okay. Try and delicately get underneath and not get too much overspill. Try and highlight some of these other areas that are supposed to be gray while I'm at it. Now that I've got the gray out, there we go. Much better. And now for the scales, we'll bring our beholder purple and go ahead and lighten it with a little bit of white. And see how that looks for us. Give that a quick little mix. See. Yeah, that should do it. If we go on light enough with that, I think that'll make an excellent highlight. Okay. And let's get as much of that off as we can. We really want to go super light on this one. And we gotta be careful. Oh yeah, that's perfect. There we go. That's bringing the highlights that we want. This is exactly what I was hoping for from the pink. Just so it shows that you sometimes just have to try. See what works. See what works, see what doesn't work. Okay. I am super happy with that. Let's try and get some right on the tip of the tail. Perfect. And with that, I would say that we are done. I'm very happy with that. And I hope you are all happy with your minis too. Thank you for watching along, and I appreciate you bearing with me with those technical difficulties we had. And I do hope that the audio comes out okay. Let me know how your minis came out. Don't forget to hit me up on socials and show me what you painted along with me. And if you'd be so kind to do all of those fun YouTube things, liking, subscribing, commenting, those help let other people find these videos too. And with that, I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.